Someone asked a few days ago. I told them the answer, and I'm going to tell them again with the video. So they want to know how to remove the rear subframe in order to change their brake rotor, which people say they warp. This guy does. I don't believe him, but maybe this is the case. So your brake rotor, as you can see, is bolted to your pinion output. So you got to pull the rear in to do that. It's really easy. One, two, three 17mm bolts and nuts, as well as two 14mm bolts and nuts on your upper control arms, and then two on your shock mount, upper shock mount. So you just pull those bolts and it drops right off. You also have to take off some 8mm that hold brackets for your brake line. There's one, and there's two. All right, see it? You see it? Yep. So those two 8s, and then you can put a floor jack underneath there, so the bike is supported under the engine support, whatever. And then you put a floor jack under your rear carriage, and it swings away. I like to take the wheels off just to make the rear assembly more manageable. There's a lot of reasons you would want to do this. Like to put a stretch on it. Like I have a stretch I made for this bike. That's why I have a hole drilled here. I'm gonna mess with my gear reduction right now. So to get to the back gear reduction, the secondary, you've got to pull the subframe as well as pull the airbox. Super easy, very sweet to do. I'll show you what you need to do inside the motor to run that reduction as well. This is your speed sensor, and as you can see, mine looks a little weird. You have to modify it for the gear reduction. You have to grind off so it sinks deeper into the case. I posted some pictures on the Mud Puppy page about how to do that, but basically just take a file and file it until it is allowed to sit deeper into the case. There's the output shaft and everything. Yep. This is just the sweetest bike to work on ever. Everything is just so simple. See how clean my motor looks? This is a 2015. It's been in nothing but mud. Everyone says I don't clean my shit very well. Ha! You got nothing. Nothing! Something to look out for. This is the second Honda I've seen this on. Do you see the O-ring right there? Let me put the flash on. Something to look out for. This is the second Honda I've seen it on. You can see the O-ring right there. That's the O-ring that's been rolled out of the joint. So that thing is not watertight anymore. You got to watch that O-ring. Make sure it's well greased when you're putting it together. Second Honda I've seen do this. One brand new from Honda. Niels, you need to take care of it on your bike at some point. Yep. Alright, so I got the motor pulled apart. The things to look out for is when you put it back together, you have to line up this long shaft right here, this long part, with the N on the case. It's for neutral. Engine needs to be in neutral. That'll keep you from destroying your shift angle sensor, which tells you what gear you're in. Also, you got to look for this O-ring. Make sure that O-ring stays where it is. Make sure this shim goes back on the top, your secondary shaft of your output shaft of your transmission. And make sure this shim right here goes back on your reverse cancel. I'm going to show you what you have to do to install the Jeremy Lee not welded solid gear. Do not put a welded gear secondary. Do you see the grinding on the shaft right there? You see how it looks like it's not completely symmetrical? Because I grinded off a little bit of it. That shaft slides right out of the back of the motor. That's the shift shaft. You've seen it on the front of the motor if you've ever done a gear reduction. That's what the little operator goes on that operates the clutch. But you can see how I've grinded it down to where it's no longer circular. That is what is required for it to clear the larger bottom gear on the gear reduction. That's it. Very, very freaking easy. That's pretty much it. I mean, it all just drops off. It's all one piece now. There's your shift shaft mechanism and everything. It's all very easy and sweet to understand because it's a Honda and it's perfect in every way. This is what the Jeremy Lee... So I suspect this is a Honda factory gear, and this is the thing he has machined. It's two gears that stack on there next to each other. It does matter which way they're set, right? Because if you put them on the wrong spline, your teeth can be off a little bit. But he marks it, and it's pretty obvious when you put it together that you need to play with it until the teeth line up. But yeah, that's people call it a 21%. That's what Highlifter and Turner call it. They're full of shit. On a OG 420 or a non-fuel injected 500, it is a 15% reduction. On a fuel injected 500, or actually on any 420, it's a 15%. On a carbureted 500, it's a 15%. On a fuel injected 500, meaning 2012 or newer, it's a 12 to 13%. People calculate it different ways. So I call it a 12.5% reduction. That's what it is on my bike. If you put this on a Rancher 420 IRS, it's a much larger percent reduction. And what else does it fit? I think that's it. But yeah, so it's anywhere between, like, 12.5 and 15 on most bikes, unless you have a double clutch Rancher, in which case it's like, I don't know, a 40% reduction or something crazy because of the way they're geared. But yeah, so I'm gonna put that together now. I'm taking my reduction out of this because I have secret plans for this gear reduction. P500. Yeah. So yep, there it is. Trying to go to the questions I got about this while I get it apart. Oh yeah, so there's the sensor and the cover. You can do this on the bike, but you see how thin my sensor is? This piece of plastic right here, my thumbnail's next to, used to be about twice as thick. So I filed it to where that sits a little bit deeper in the case. Okay, and that's because there's a smaller top gear. So now that I'm doing all this, I'm gonna have to shim it back out a little bit. Just gonna put a washer under here and some new Ultra Gray. It'll work fine. But you definitely have to shim this, or you're gonna get a weird check engine light and your speedometer's not gonna work. Yep. One more quick thing. So when you're installing this, you're gonna be like, oh no, these gears don't line up because the bottom gear is much farther back than the front gear. That is just simply due to the fact that there is a spring in the front drive shaft, which is taking the output shaft and sliding it towards the back of the case about 1/2 inch. Once the cover's all bolted on, that gear mesh will line up perfect. No need to worry. Some people recommend pulling the front diff forward and yanking the front drive shaft out when doing these types of secondary reductions. If you've ever done a reduction in a Honda Rubicon, the big red gear reduction is essentially a secondary gear reduction. Well, not essentially, it is. It's a secondary gear reduction involving changing 3 gears because it gets reversed from the sub gear case on a Rubicon. So same kind of thing to fight with there. The shaft wants to slide out at you a little bit, but I don't think there's any need to mess with the front diff as long as you understand that once you put the cover on, everything will be okay. Another pro tip for putting this back together, you actually have to align this shaft. If you look in it, there's a little arm on it. You have to align it with a hole. So if you look at this dot on it, and if that dot is pointing back at you, when you put the case cover on, it'll line itself up. So the way you make that dot point at you is you just make sure that this is centered. You go max travel right in the middle, boom, pop it on there, it'll line right up, it'll be good to go. That's something people screw up all the time, and they're like, oh, my shifter's all floppy, it doesn't work, and they got to pull the cover off again and figure it out. If you read the manual, it tells you all this, but I know none of you guys read the manual